Hello again, welcome back to Asgard, and welcome back to our Misty World Tutorial Spotlight series. Today we're going to be covering agriculture, but there is a couple things that I want to mention that Liam brought up on the Misty World Discord. First up, if you have rubber, you can actually chuck this at mobs. I didn't even know this. It does do a little bit of damage and will eventually kill them. And the cool thing is, you can see they actually bounce back, so you're not wasting them. Though I don't know, with with rubber being as hard to get it as it is, and it's rare really. I don't know that I'd go around chucking them just in case you lose them, but you can throw them, which is a really cool thing. And then also, if we have a protective suit, this is another thing I didn't even realize you could do. There's just so much in this mod, right? Oh, that was from something else. But anyways, we can combine this. So you can see that our diamond chestplate now gets 80% protective aspect to it. And you can do it with all your pieces. So there is that as well. Had no clue. Also, growing foggy sponge. Whenever you're growing that, it is absorbent. So I didn't even realize that was a thing either. Of course, the mist having like the negative effects and all that is a little bit newer of a feature. It's like the last big update that added all that stuff. There was still some side effects and stuff. You had to wear a protective mask to go down there and all in the past. But having those negative effects and having those absorbent blocks and stuff, I think is all new features. So. And also I want to, really quickly, I want to specify when you're breaking these, make sure you're breaking the smallest bits. Don't break the thick bits. Alright, so the first thing that I want to talk about today, we're going to try to wrap everything up today in one culmination of agriculture. So it might be a little bit of a longer episode, we'll see. But the first thing I want to talk about is farming. Because I know there's generally a lot of questions, I think, as far as farming goes. Because you do have the different types of soil available. And I do want to point out, just really quickly, there is a hygrometer. You can craft this just like so. And if you come out, you're going to see it move up and down, kind of like a compass. Yeah, there we go. Now it's starting to go up. And this is basically just going to tell you kind of how wet of an area it is. So the forest grass here is going to be wet. I think the forest, let me go to a different area so I can show you, like if we go over to the savanna, you're going to see that this drops down a bit. And if we grab some soil here, it's dry. So you're going to be able to tell, kind of with this, if you want to make it. It's not very expensive to make, and you can make that. But you don't really have to make it. So you can just kind of run around and explore and see what you can find as well. But the next thing that we need to talk about is soil types. You'll notice if you look at soil, you're going to see a few different stats here. You're going to see if it's wet or if it's dry. You're going to see the porosity. And you're going to see the humus content. And this is all fairly important. Of course, humus has really high humus content because it is humus. But you can see like this forest dirt, it's only a 2%. Occasionally you'll find a little bit higher. I think, let's see. Of course, these are low porosity. There's no humus content to them. But for example, I think, well, overgrown humus, but it may have to do with this being in creative mode. There may not be some other ones. But if we grab this, you can see the humus content here is 6%. It's dry, it's high porosity. If we pop back over to the forest, this one's got 6% medium porosity, and it is wet over here. If you want a lot of humus content, of course, you'll want to go probably to the swamp. It's going to be consistently higher. You don't generally find soils too often. I don't even know that I've ever seen them. It may not even be possible to find a soil that's not like a humus or something like that that has above a 6%. It's not super common anyways. If we pop over to the swamp, for example, and we grab a piece of dirt. Of course, it is going to vary from spot to spot, but yeah, the swampy grass here is only 6% as far as humus content. So you need to look at all of that. That's all important. Not so much if it's wet or dry, because that is an easy fix. Because, for example, this is dry right now, but if I was to take it, just like I showed you before, we can make these blocks wet just by putting, water near them and allowing that to wet that soil. So now it's a wet prairie grass. So that's not as important because it's such an easy fix. And really the humus content and stuff, pretty easy fix. But another thing that you can do, let's say you have, this is sandy dirt, dry, high porosity, and the humus content is 2%. And then we have, let's go with a low porosity. And if you take this sandy dirt, you take your, your grass here, you can mix them together. So you can see that this one, the humus content's only 2%, this one's 6%, this is low, and this is high. So we're going to come out with a medium with a 4% humus content. So we can mix those soils together, just like the farming in Misty World is really, it's really neat because it took a lot of inspiration off of, real life. What you can grow in areas, what grows well in areas, and what kind of soil and stuff like that. So you do want to bear that in mind, and if you want to kind of get a mid-range soil, you can. Or if you keep finding high porosity and low porosity and you want medium, you can mix them. So you can do that. Now, once you have your soils, depending on what you're wanting to grow, you're going to want a different type of soil, and it all comes down to the porosity of it. If you want to grow something like, let's say wheat, you're going to want to have either a low or medium porosity. High porosity is not going to work because the soil is just going to be too porous, and it's just not going to support it. Because, for example, these are high porous blocks. We have rocky dirt, sandy dirt, and soured soil. Wheat's not going to grow good on that because it's just, wheat's going to need a place to put down its roots and something that holds moisture. These are not going to hold moisture. They're not going to allow really for the wheat to spread out. However, these type soils that are really porous are great for something like if you wanted to grow melons or pumpkins or carrots or potatoes. Stuff like that's going to grow fine in this. Now, if you want to grow your wheat, you're going to look for something like swampy grass. It's a perfect example. It's low porosity. Oh, prairie grass is also... but you can see, it looks like it's all rocky and whatnot. But if you want to grow your wheat and stuff, you're going to look for ideally like a 1 or a 2. I think, let's see, stuff like sugarcane, I believe, you'll need a low porosity. It needs to really hold that moisture because it needs a really wet environment. So just for examples, if you're growing, let's see, like sugarcane, get yourself a low porosity soil. If you're growing something like wheat, go for a 1 or a 2. Don't go for something like this. If you're trying to grow vegetables, you're going to need a medium porosity. It needs to be just right so that dirt that we made earlier would grow things like beetroot and stuff like that. It would grow that just fine. But if you're wanting to grow stuff like potatoes, melons, carrots, pumpkins, this high porosity soil is what you're going to want to grow it on. If you don't grow it on the correct soil, it's not going to grow. I don't believe it will ever grow. If it does grow, it's extremely, extremely slow. Now, once you pick out your soil type, go ahead. All plants are going to need water. So I would just go ahead and put water down. There we go. We have wet soil now, and you can see it's going to spread to like adjacent blocks and stuff like that. So if I come out a little bit further, it's not going to spread as quickly because that has direct, kind of connection over to the water, but it is going to slowly spread out into these adjacent areas. So, and then once you're ready to farm, of course, it is as simple as grabbing your hoe, hoeing the ground, planting your seeds. There we go. And then that is, that's going to start growing. But you also, when it comes to growing your plants, look at your humus content. This is going to be pretty important. So what we can do, this is kind of like how much nutrients are in your soil. So what we're going to want to do is get some kind of a fertilizer. So, you know, I talked about humus a bit back. We can use that. We can also use things like ash. This is all kind of corresponds. If you ever farmed or done any kind of crops or anything like that, you're probably pretty familiar with all this stuff. But if you've never done it, it's probably fairly new to you. Now, on my crops at home, I have used humus and I have used ash. I've never used sapropol or sapropel. I'm not familiar with that. And I've also never used saltpeter. But you can use any of these four things to fertilize your crops. And what we can do is we can just take and we can right click, and right click. And you can see now that the humus content is 6%, whereas it was 4%. It's now 6% on these. And we can add additional humus. So you can see now we're up to an 8%. And yeah, it looks like the water only spreads out about 2 blocks. You can see right here it's only come out on that one. That's because, you know, there's not one 2 blocks away. This is 2 blocks away for it. This one has not spread yet, but it will eventually. So 2 blocks to keep it wet, but it is going to get wet anytime that it rains or anything like that. So that is an option as well. And we're not going to be able to go above this 8% mark, adding humus and stuff like that. You can, once again, you can get a little bit higher humus content with something like overgrown humus. But as far as your soils and stuff like that, you're not going to be able to go any higher than just that 8% mark. But bone meal will still work, but you will notice whenever this starts getting growth ticks, you can see that the humus content drops in this. So you're going to want to, you know, if you want these to grow as fast as they can, you're going to want to keep applying some kind of a fertilizer to this to upkeep the soil. Because what happens is if I was to grow this too much, for example, I keep adding bone meal to it. Bone meal will dry out the humus content a lot faster than just letting it grow on its own. But you can see I can't apply bone meal anymore to this. The reason being, humus content is now 2%. It will never go below 2%, and once it gets down to 2%, you're not going to be able to bone meal anymore. So you have to keep your soil basically, you know, keep applying nutrients, make sure it's nutritious soil for the plants, and that is going to run down on its own, and it's going to run down extremely fast if you bone meal. I don't know that it's really any different though than if it was just growing on its own, because I mean you saw that this one it went down a minute ago on its own. So, which also I want to talk about mulch. You know, we got mulch whenever we would strip our logs, and I do want to mention this. I almost forgot. If you have mulch, what you can do is you can just right click it there, and what it's going to do is it's just going to help protect your plant from becoming dried out. Which if you run your water, it's not a big deal, but mulch can help if you're relying on rain or something like that to water your crops, because it's going to keep that soil wet a bit longer by applying that mulch. Now if it's right next to the water, it's not really going to do much of anything unless this water was to happen to dry out somehow or something like that. And then let's talk about making a compost heap to get some compost. So what we can do, I find it's easiest, there's Pete down here. I find it's easiest really to do it with like a mushroom, because you're going to shift right click. Mushrooms want you to, and of course this is only in creative mode, because if I come into survival mode I cannot make mycelium, but we're going to talk about mycelium in just a second. But if you shift right click on the ground, you can see I make a compost pile. Now this is really better to do if we do something like this. This is, I guess, probably the best way to make compost. Though if you're in a swamp biome, you will have better luck making compost because it stays naturally moist here. Because of course making a compost heap, like I've got a compost heap in real life, and you want it to stay wet. You know, I've got mine so it's exposed to rain, and if it does get dry we have to water it. to keep that moisture in there. So it's kind of the same way. What you're going to do is you're going to dig down and maybe put a water block here and do your compost heap here. If you want like really good quick compost, because this is going to take a little while for this to work. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to take some kind of organic material. Personally, I tend to like mushrooms, but most any organic material will work. And once you have it started, I've never really been able to get it to work with saplings unless it's already started. But you can use saplings for this. But what you're going to do is you're going to fill it up. And it has to be completely full before it starts running. And then what I suggest you do is just cover it. And then what's going to happen is after a while, and it does take a long time on here, or a fairly long time, but those things are going to help you. Like cover it up and make sure it's wet down there, and mark it or something like that. And what's going to happen is that compost pile is going to turn into humus. So if you want to farm humus, that's how you're going to do it. So maybe setting up, if you get really into farming in the Misty world, setting up a place to create that humus, not a bad idea. It'll come in handy. Now the next thing I want to talk about is mycelium and mushrooms. This can be a nightmare. I actually dug around here a little bit, but basically if you start digging around underground, there is a chance, a very small chance. Now if you're in creative mode, I can just right click and I can make mycelium. But if you're not in creative mode, you're going to have to dig around to try to find a mycelium block if you want to farm mushrooms. And it can be, as you can see, it can be extremely rare. That is one thing about the Misty world, is most everything you're going to have to really put in a lot of effort to find. Now there is that the sniff pig that I was talking about earlier. Once that gets implemented, that will be able to help you find mycelium. But until then, you're on your own. You got to dig for it. So I'm not even going to try to find any because it could literally take me hours, even in creative mode, to find any. But basically, once you find mycelium, you're going to be able to grow mushrooms on that mycelium. But once you do find mycelium, I would suggest going ahead and getting it. Use a silk touch pick or a silk touch shovel or something to get that mycelium, and then put it underground and grow your mushrooms down underground with your mycelium down there, and it's going to grow a bit faster. They're going to like darkness, of course, because they're mushrooms. And that's really how you farm mushrooms. You're just going to have to, once again, find that mycelium, at least until the sniff pig is implemented, and this could take forever. In my experience, I've tried mining for it, and it's some work. It's some work. But what you're looking for is, it's going to look kind of like that once you do find it. But it's just super rare to come across. Okay, now the next thing we're going to talk about is taming. All the different animals. What you're going to do is you're going to look for this open skills menu, which, depending if you're playing a pack, there might be other mods that add that, but this one is for the Misty world, and you're going to set it to something, and that way you can look at your skills. You're going to have taming and meat cutting. This is also where you can see your intoxication and chemical pollution. I didn't mention that before, but I think I did mention that this tab was here, but I forgot to mention that, I think, on the mist part. But today we're looking at taming and meat cutting. Now, meat cutting is pretty straightforward. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'm just going to tell you, basically, whenever you kill animals, you're going to get experience with meat cutting. There we go. You can see I got some experience with meat cutting. It doesn't work in creative mode. You have to be in survival mode to get that experience. But that's going to start going up. And that's basically all there is to that. Alright, so the next thing we're going to talk about is animal taming. Now, what you see before you is every possible tameable animal within the Misty world. When it comes to taming, meat cutting, you're going to get some extra drops. Taming is really important to look at your skill, because depending on your skill, you can only tame certain creatures. So, for example, if I go into survival mode here, and I take sloth meat, this is what you tame monks with. These guys right here. And you'll notice these guys are aggressive. There's a few predatory animals. We'll talk about those. Basically the ones that take meat, for the most part, are predatory. Yeah, I mean, you can see these guys are not interested in it whatsoever. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to start from the very bottom. And unfortunately, there is only one tier 1 animal, and that is momos. These little guys. Generally, you could tell generally by the size, that's about where it's going to fall in rank, but there is some variation there. But for momos, you're going to need cut mushrooms. That's what you're going to have to get to tame these. And you'll notice, I think they're a little bit interested. If we start right-clicking, we can feed them, and you can see my taming skill is going up. That one's tamed, and that one's tamed. Okay, so our taming skill has went up to about halfway to level 2. Now, momos are kind of useful because we can apply them with a saddle, and we can ride. We can apply a saddle and ride on these guys, but you're going to have to use mushroom on a stick to ride them around. They are not fast by any stretch of the imagination. And you can't directly control them. You can't make them jump or anything like that. They're basically going to be about the same as walking. But the Moslings, these guys right here, these are a rank 2. This is our first rank 2. Momos are the only rank 1. And generally, if you're in survival mode, you're going to have the requisite taming skill to tame a certain rank. So if you want to tame these guys, these Moslings, you're going to have a rank 2 to do so. So Moslings, there's 2 different things that you can do. You can either use pink mushrooms or marsh mushrooms. But what you can do with Moslings is, once again, you can saddle them. And these you can ride around with either marsh mushroom on a stick or pink mushroom on a stick. So, you know, we can grab this and ride around. Now, next up we have the Forest Runners, also a tier 2. Yeah, actually these, we've got to tame them kind of like an ocelot. So you can see he's coming up. I'm just going to stand here. And there we go. That one's tamed. Okay, so the Forest Runner, and I've probably got, I think I got a little bit of experience, but you can see he doesn't freak out whenever I come close. That one is terrified of me. And so it's going to be the same with those others, if they're like running around away from you. But these, we can, you can't ride Forest Runners, contrary to their name, but we can milk them. Now next up we have Pricklers. These are also a tier 2. Now next up we have Pricklers. They're tamed with purple mushrooms. So that's how you're going to get those. But they don't actually do anything. You can't shear them, you can't ride them, and you can't milk them. So, but if you want some, they are tamed with purple mushrooms. Next up we have Caravans. These guys, you may have seen them when we were in the desert. They're going to be tamed with sand mushrooms and also tan mushrooms. They can be tamed with sand and tan mushrooms. And once you tame them, they can be milked. So that's what they're good for. Then we have the Horbs. You're going to tame these with red and orange mushrooms. Once again, these have all been tier 2s so far. And remember, you're going to tame most of these like an ocelot. You know, you're going to hold your food out, just stand there still, and get them to come up to you at this point. And Horbs, they don't do anything once you tame them, but they can be tamed with those red and orange mushrooms. Next up we have Barvogs. These are our very first tier 3. So that's the end of our tier 2s. Barvogs, you're going to tame these with sand and tan mushrooms. And once you tame these guys, they can be saddled. So for example, I could do that, but you are going to have to use your mushroom on a stick. In this case, you're going to have to use sand or tan mushroom on a stick. And all these are crafted just with fishing rods and, you know, the corresponding mushroom, by the way. Then next up we have the Wolders. The Wolders are kind of nice. You're going to tame these guys with snow tree saplings. And once you tame them, they can be sheared. they can be milked, and they can be ridden. Then next up we have Sloths. They're also a tier 3. They're going to be tamed with Swampy Poplar and Weeping Tree saplings. And really their only use is to kill them. And if you are to kill them, they have a chance to drop tallow. They also drop meat and bones. Most of these creatures drop meat. Well, pretty much all these creatures drop meat. But you could see that that one dropped bone, meat, a sapling, and some tallow. Now next up we have Sniffs. These you can tame with purple mushrooms. They do drop tallow just like the sloth does. And I know there's plans eventually to make it so they can help you find mycelium. But that's not been implemented as of yet. So. Now next up we have Brochuredons. These are our first tier 4. And you're going to tame these with black and spotted mushrooms. And if you kill them, they drop tallow. That's the only use for them. And then over here, we have the Halters. This is our last tier 4. There's only 2 tier 4s. And the Halter, you're going to tame it with any kind of meat. These guys like meat. These are our first kind of carnivorous creature. Any kind of meat of your choosing. They don't have any use, but you can tame them. So that way they're basically friendly and they hang out. Now next up we have Galaga. This is the only tier 5. And Galaga, you're going to tame it with any kind of meat. And once you do, you can ride these around. And they're pretty tanky. At 50 health, Wilders rocking just a few hearts. So it is, I mean, these guys are pretty stout to ride on. And then lastly, we have the Monk. 60 health. It can be saddled. It drops tallow when it dies. And you're going to tame it with any kind of meat of your choosing. And that is all the animals that you can tame. Now, in addition, I would like to go ahead and just show you the remaining creatures in the game, in the Misty world. So, you have the Grave Bug. Oh, let me set it to normal mode. You have the Grave Bug. These you're going to find in kind of graves. They're going to spawn from, a lot of times from remains and stuff. So, you're going to find these down inside of the structures. And they'll attack you. Next up, we have Forest Spiders. You're going to find these in the forest, as the name might imply. And these guys are going to attack you. Go. Next up we have Swamp Crabs. These guys live in the swamp and they are going to attack you. And next up we have the Snowflake. You're going to find this in snowy areas a lot. They are going to attack you. And if you want to make arrows in the Misty world, hunting these down is worth it because they are going to drop wings. You can find wings from like urns and stuff sometimes. But these are going to be your primary source of it. So, then next up we have the Tropic Woodlows. This guy you're going to find in jungles, and he is going to attack you. Then last up you have the Cyclops. These guys you're going to find them. You're going to find these in the savanna areas and the deserts, you know, and they are going to attack you. And then last up we have the Desert Fish. Which if we go into survival mode, you can see he swims after you. It tries to attack you. Once again, another little critter. But these guys you definitely want to kill if you spot them because this is where you get your desert fish swim bladder detoxant. And the last thing I want to talk about is saplings, seeds, and pine cones and things like that. You're going to occasionally see sapling or leaves that'll have a little bit different texture on them. Like these, very noticeably different than that. And each tree is going to be different, but you will be able to notice at a glance which ones have, you know, seeds or pine cones or whatever the case may be for that specific tree. Then all you have to do is just right click and you're going to pull off, like I got umbrella tree pods. So you can gather those. And then of course if you're in the forest and you find a stone tree, if it's in season, then you can get stone tree berries from that. But that's pretty much the last thing I want to talk about is seasons. Misty World does have its own kind of seasonal clock. I don't know of a way to actually find out what season it is. I believe the days are shorter during the winter season, but I'm not one that ever keeps up with the time of day when I'm playing Minecraft, so I can never tell what season it is. But there is seasons, and different trees are going to be in season at different times. Like we were able to get umbrella tree pods, but you notice that there are no foggy pine. I think they make pine cones. Yeah, foggy pine cones. They're going to put on pine cones. They're going to have kind of brown little textures on them, but they're not in season right now. So if you want to get those seeds and berries and things like that, you can find them on these. And then you can plant them, of course, in those little pots, you know, in little flower pots and stuff. So, but with that, I believe I've covered everything that we need to cover. Hopefully that kind of cleared up agriculture. It's really not a difficult thing. It's just a bit more realistic than, you know, just planting the seed in soil next to water and you're good to go. There's a little bit more to it. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. With that, we are wrapping up our Misty World tutorial series. I think we've covered, you know, pretty much everything within the Misty World, at least at the moment. Of course, the mod's still in development, and I know there's still planned things for it. But at the moment, I think we've covered, you know, pretty much everything. So, if there is any other small things or whatnot, I'll pin them in a comment or something, or maybe make a video if it's, you know, quite a bit or something. But anyways, with that, I'm going to end out this episode and this tutorial series, at least for now. Once more content gets added, you know, we may come back and revisit a bit, but for now, we're going to be wrapping up. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you found it helpful, at least in some way. And if you did, as always, be sure and hit that like button and go ahead and subscribe if you're not already, to stay updated with when new videos come out. And I hope to see you guys next time. So until then, as always, do take care, stay safe. I'll see you guys then.